Welcome back to The Unknown Angler. Today we're going to do the extended body squid, also known as the Tutti Frutti squid. Okay, the first part of tying this fly is actually tying it on some poly tubes, which are, there's a couple of different brands of these, but these are small clear poly tubes. They come in small, medium, and large. For the size 6 fish masks that we're going to be using, I'm going to use the small poly tubes. Basically, I'm using a needle. You can use a needle or you can use any of the polytube tying kits that come out. But I use a needle. I push mine onto the needle. This is the small. I cut it right off at the end of the needle. And the reason for doing that is because I only need a portion that's about 2 inches long. It's kind of a good way to do it. And then you can just burn the end there just a little bit. And that gives you a nice area that you're going to be able to tie up against in the back, and then you just take that and flip it around. By the way, don't do that too fast because that will burn your fingers on the end. So I'm going to start out by wrapping thread on down here. Just a little bit of some Loctite. This is super glue. Doesn't need to be Loctite. It can be anything. It's a nice little one. If you can find the ones with the brushes, that's great. And then I like to tie over that. That keeps the thread from slipping around and keeps everything in that area. I only tie back about 1/4 of an inch there, which works out great. I try to take any excess glue off of there so I don't get it all over my fingers. Now what we're going to do is tie in a little bit of deer hair, actually bucktail, and we're going to keep this relatively short. We are going to build a little teeny weeny bulkhead there, and that's going to be to support our feather, tentacles, legs, whatever you want to call them. So basically you only need it about the length of the piece that you're tying in, about 2 inches. And you need a very small amount. Now, like I said, we're going to tie in a very, very small bulkhead, which is going to be about 1/4 of an inch over, 2 wraps over, and then just spread that around with your fingers. 2 very loose wraps. Spread it around with your fingers. Make sure that you get a nice kind of even coating with that. And then give it a little bit of a cinch. You can't go too hard on these tubes because everything will spin around. Then go back up to the front and just push everything back. Splay it all back. And like I said, only leave about 1/4 of an inch here while you're doing this. Get everything folded back. And you don't need a ton. So very, very small amount of bucktail here. And once you've got everything pulled back, a few wraps in front of it. You'll find that on these tubes you don't need a ton of wraps in front, just a few wraps in front. Build up a little bit of a thread base there, and you should get a kind of a bulkhead up front here. That little funnel there funnels that back. Now we are going to use some flat-wing hackles. You can use any hackles that you would like. I like these particular flat wings from Hairline. Way down at the base of these is where you'll find the ones you want. And these are the ones you wouldn't normally use on probably any other fly. Right down in here, right down in the base. These short 2 to 3 inch hackles. This is going to be a Tutti Frutti fly. Tutti Frutti meaning it's a combination of chartreuse, pink, and white. So I have 2 chartreuse, 2 pink, 2 white hackles, and I want those to be about 2.5 inches long. So what I'll do is I'll line up all the hackle tips like I have here, hold it, and then cut those off right there. I normally don't cut it off over the top of the fly, but I wanted to show you that I just nothing real exact here. You just hold them down. So now all the backs match up, all the tips match up. When I pull that out of there, now you have 6 hackles that you're going to tie in. So what I like to do is split them all apart. So you've got you got your whites, your pinks, and your white, pink, and chartreuse. Works out great. So now we're going to take each one of these and we're going to tent this back area here with the hackles. So we're going to tie them right in, curved side in, so the curved side should be going this way into the, and then we're going to just kind of rotate this and we're going to change the colors up as we rotate ourselves around the fly. And we're going to do what we call tent. So we're going to tent that. Now you see what the what we're using the bucktail for. Perfect. The bucktail is used to keep everything splayed out and keep it in a nice. Now the nice part about this is there's no hook obviously in your way. So tying this in the round, it's pretty easy to do. And the more they pump out, these are your tentacles. So the more they pump out, or the more they push out to the sides, the better. See how you got nice, and then you can just kind of go in and vary them around and pull them around a little bit, make sure everything's kind of tweaked out, and just tie those off. Now, once again, I like to put a little super glue in here. And the reason is because I don't want any of this spinning around. I just put a dab in there, don't put a lot. Put a little super glue on. I'm going to work my way forward here a little bit. Work my way back. And now, this is the Finesse 3/4 clear for this particular one. Body chenille medium from Hairline. The chocolates. Not probably saying that right, but there are different sizes of this body chenille depending on what size fish skull you use, and I'll show you the fish skulls that I'm using, which is going to be the size 6 in a second. Depending on what fish skulls you use, you want to use the right size for the fish skull you're actually using. We're just going to palmer that forward, keep some nice close wraps here. You don't need a ton, probably 5 to 6 wraps will do it. And that's 6 right there. That seems about right. Take that off. Push this back. Get as much of those fibers out of the way as possible. Push it back. I'm going to take this, I'm going to tie it off now. Now what I'm going to do here is very quickly burn off these little front fibers that are sticking out. You're going to see why in a second. It's kind of important to do this, but you also don't want to get too close to the tube. Okay, so we're going to use the fish skull masks in a size 6. This is for the smaller squids, and that size 6 fish skull will fit perfectly over that area there. And don't put the eyes on this first, because what we're going to do is coat the body here, or the chenille, around this area. We're going to just put an incredible amount of UV epoxy in there. And the stuff I'm using here is pretty thick. I'll show it to you in a second once I'm done. Then you want to slip your, and you want to make sure you got plenty of epoxy all around the area. Make sure it's up front. And then if you hit that with the flashlight, this is why you leave the eyes off. It will cure that through the clear fish skull, and that becomes a solid part of what we have of the fly now. So that's now really pretty solid on there, and it's not going anywhere. We're going to make it even more solid in a minute, and that's going to be the back end of your fly. Now you can actually take the size 6 eyes. So I use the living eyes, the ones that match it. You can use any 6mm eyes that you want in these. And even though these are stick-on eyes, I do still take a little bit of Loctite and put it in the eye area. So little drop. Good. We'll drop on the other side. And that's good. You really don't want to touch this with your fingers. If you push on the center of the eye, push on the other side, center of the eye. I have found that the thin glue that I use here does not cure quite as rapidly as I'd like. Okay, so once you have that, what you want to do is come in here with a razor blade and cut right about the 1/4 inch mark from the eye, and just slip that tube right off of there. So now what you have is you have a very nice back end to your squid. Now, just a slight bit, not a ton, just a little bit. Make the ball on that end. Then we're going to take, and we're going to go on the back end of this fly, and we're going to find it's kind of hard to do on camera here. We're going to find the center, and we're going to push that through. And now you understand why I burned that back end, because that's going to pull through and it's going to actually stop right there. Now, we're not done yet. Take your Loctite again and put a bunch on that back end. And do this quickly. Just pull it right and boom. And pull it right through. Do it very quickly. And just let it sit there for a second. And now it's glued in place, but you don't want to trust that to be just glued in place like that. Don't you love the way that looks already? Oof. Loving the way that's moving. That whole back end is going to move. It's going to undulate back and forth. Anyway, so now we're going to make this more secure. Just a little bit more secure. Some monofilament, fine monofilament tying thread. This is actual tying thread. And we're going to take this, we're going to hold it in our hands. We're not going to put it in the vise. And we're going to wrap right around the beak that was sticking out of the fly. Then we're going to cut this off. This is kind of tricky, but you'll figure it out. A couple of wraps around there. And then we're going to wrap forward onto the actual monofilament itself and build a ball up, just a small one, nothing huge, right there at the base of the monofilament and the tube. And we're going to take this whole thing and we're going to do a couple of half hitches. And the way you do that is you just take your line, you go over the end of the monofilament all the way down, give it a tug. You just want to kind of lock it down for a second because we're going to be coating that with super glue. Let's try it again. Once again, over the top, bring it down. And once you have two wraps in there, remember, we're going to be coating this with super glue, so get a couple wraps in there. And that's what it's going to look like. And I'm going to take that super glue again. I found the ones with the Loctite with the brush to be hard to find, but any super glue with a brush will do if you can find it. And then just put it right over that area. Now I coat it and then I leave it. So if you haven't used super glue with monofilament, it's like welding it together. It actually melts the monofilament and it gets right in there and it creates a bond. So I'm going to put this to the side now, and what I do is I tie probably a half a dozen of these back ends, these extensions at a time. So I'll make a half a dozen of these because I'm going to tie at least a half a dozen of these flies, if not a dozen, and I'll do them all at once. So so to finish off this fly, we're going to use actually an Ahrex SA 280. A 1/0. These are extremely short shanked hooks. The SL12S work absolutely fine too, the Gamakatsu, and the tarpon hooks from Mustad, the C68SNs work great too. All in size 1/0. You want a very, very short shank in here because the way we're going to finish off the head is with a brush. So you go off and you've built all your extended bodies and you're ready to go. I'm going to tie in with some pink 140. You can use pink, white, or chartreuse. Doesn't really matter what you want to use to finish off the fly. Just cover the hook shank completely. Don't wrap into the bend. You don't want you do not want the extension to angle down. And the extension should go and it's got to sit right up on top. Should go between 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches beyond the shank of the hook. Wrap forward. Make sure you have it nice and straight. Don't wrap all the way to the front yet. Clip off that little extra portion. Now you can wrap into the front. Now what I'm going to do here is just, once again, add a little bit of insurance. There's no hook back here, so nothing's really going to pull this off unless it gets trapped in the fish's mouth. And trust me, that's enough thread there. Probably that'll fall apart back there before it'll get actually pulled out of there. It is 40-pound tested they're yanking on. And wrap all the way to the back of your wraps. And go grab the dubbing brush that we pre-made. This one's okay, and so to finish the fly off, we're going to use, this is the Tutti Frutti color. And I'm going to just run a quick show about how I made this. You can use 3-inch craft fur brushes from EP craft fur brushes. They'll work great. This one I'm making this custom color. A white brush, a pink brush, anything will work in here. But I really like this Tutti Frutti color. If you're into making your own brushes, this is the way to go. Anyway, tie the brush in at the back. And the reason for the short shanked hook, you really don't need much of this brush in here to make a nice, really nice head on this hook. Really nice head on this fly. Stroke all the fibers back. Now you don't have to make touching wraps, but it's because you're just almost wrapping on a bare hook shank. Touching wraps won't hurt it at all. Anyway. Wrap forward, stroke everything back. Do not crowd the head. And you should be able to get, if you tie a full brush, you should be able to get at least 3 flies out of a brush. You can definitely get 3 flies out of one of the EP brushes. Peel a little bit of the craft fur back. Make a wrap over. Try to get that cleared out of the eye. Tie it off. Pull everything back. Put a couple of wraps in. Cut off. Cut off. Couple of wraps. Tie it off for a bit. Because now we're just going to pick out. There we go. And you can see how that length is just about encroaching on that eye. And you get that lovely pink chartreuse and white color all blending together. Makes for a really, really nice fly. And this is why we tie it off, because when you pick it out, you have a good chance of, if you don't tie off, pulling that hook out of there. And when you tie the craft fur brushes, you notice I have 1.25 inches of EP fiber on the base of the brush, and what that makes it do is it gives it that nice flared out cone head there. And then it's real easy to just tie a nice neat head. Pull everything back. There's that little piece of wire sticking up, which will always drive you nuts. Always drives me nuts. Whip finish. And finish. Small amount of UV epoxy. And you're all done. There you go. I usually go up to a 3/0 to tie the 8.5 millimeter eyes, and you can see the difference between those two flies. There's a pretty big difference between these two flies. I actually go up to a 15 millimeter eye and use a 6/0 hook for the really big ones that we tie for tuna. But use different sized hooks and different sized eyes to make a much bigger fly. And you can also tie them in a whole bunch of different colors. Don't stick with just the Tutti Frutti. Pinks are really nice. The Tutti Frutti is absolutely favorite of what we use. Good luck. See you next time. Okay, so this is a little extra footage. I was just going to show you how I do the craft fur brush. We're going to start out with some pink EP fiber and lay that down. On top of that, we will add some chartreuse craft fur. This is the hairline, 3-inch craft fur. I think it's 3 to 5 inches actually. And then on top of that, we're going to add some pink craft fur. And then on top of that, we're going to add a little white craft fur. And then on top of that, we're going to add some polar flash. And then we're going to spin it up. There you go.